I have been wanting to do this chat for quite a long time because I've known Mark Shayler, our guest, for a fairly long time, and
Mm.
there's so many things to love about him. But he's truly a polymath, so that's why this conversation is going to go in lots of different directions. And you guys, please guide us of what's interesting and where your energy is, so that we can go that way. Mark, on one hand, works with businesses to reduce environmental impact and has this wealth of technical knowledge built over, I'm going to say, 3 decades of
And a bit.
and a bit of doing that, working with some of the world's biggest companies and some smaller companies um, on environmental performance and saving. I'm going to say millions of pounds or dollars, depending on where you are in the world, or euros, through that in many ways, and that's mainly through his company Ape, but
Yeah.
also, Mark, you're a founding partner of the Do Lectures, and I think we first met through the Do Lectures. Then you're an author of several books. There's Do Disrupt and Do Present, and if we'd been at home, you'd have seen them behind me. They're actually on the bookshelf I normally sit in front of. Um, and then the most recent one is this one, You Can't Make Money from a Dead Planet. Mark is also a fantastic keynote speaker, but instead of just speaking, he also runs workshops helping others find their story and their style of so we can all be better communicators and speakers. As if that wasn't enough, Mark got loads of us through the COVID lockdown much happier through two things, at least from my one. As he said, he was a bloke in doing qigong in the back of his garden, but decided to let us all follow his little morning qigongs at 8 o'clock every morning, to get movement, to get a sense of community. And then with his family, he's founded something called Reasons to be Cheerful, which I was thinking about it, Mark, and I guess it's an initiative or a platform highlighting things in life that bring joy, creating
Yeah.
community. I've had your annual, my family's all had your t-shirts and mugs for Christmas and things like that, but also events around this idea of reasons to be cheerful. I'm hoping we're going to cover most of that. Have I forgotten anything about your background, your sort of official bio?
I was a really rubbish DJ in the late 80s in
Ha!
Bradford. Like
Yeah.
truly, I just crashed records from one into another. Other than that, no, you're bang on with all of that.
Good. I actually have music on my list to chat to you about because I know it's quite important to you.
Very
Um,
much so, yeah.
so with that, we could go in a million directions, but I wanted to start with the person you are, I guess. And one of the things that even in your professional life figures really heavily is your collaboration with your family, with your wife, Nicola, and your children who are now grown up. But I've sort of wondered, what was your childhood like? Was
That's,
where does that come
it's,
from?
it's a really great question. Gosh, I almost feel like I needed to create, this is going to sound really bad, like the antidote to my childhood. My childhood was great and I was really happy. It's not a woe is me childhood. It was the 70s. I was born in 68, so I'm 56 now. So it was the late 70s, sorry, mid 70s. And it was times were tough financially. It was I'm from a working class family, so we weren't rolling in dough, right? We did without more than just Sky, right? We did without proper trousers some days and things. So it was a lovely childhood, in as much as it was a free childhood. There were no phones. We weren't scared to go out. I spent most of my time outside. I've got a really good friend actually, Lou, who asks the question of you, what was your favorite toy as a child? And then will tell you, kind of almost like a fortune teller, where you are in life, where you're going. And when she asked me, I said, I didn't have one. So my brothers were Lego and making stuff. I said, mine was outside. And she said, yeah, I could have told you that. So I spent most of my time scrumping apples and pears and blackberries and running and jumping and getting into trouble and playing football really badly, but rugby really well. And so I had this kind of like wild, free childhood. My dad was a photographer, and he had that kind of like arty side to him. My mum worked in as a receptionist in the local sock factory in Hinckley in the Midlands, and it was an ostensibly happy childhood. My idol was my granddad, who, as all I suspect little boys' idols are, who worked at Triumph Motorbikes. He used to be a tool maker. I'm beginning to sound like Keir Starmer. He was a tool
It
maker
was like
in
excellent.
Triumph Motorbikes. In fact, it's really interesting. So my whole family, my nan's my nan was one of 11 brothers and sisters, although we subsequently found out she was one of 25, split across two families, and it was all a bit hush hush. But she had 11 brothers and sisters that we knew about then. And all of the men, and it was like that back then, all of the men worked in automotive. They all worked we grew up in Coventry. So one of them invented Jet 1 and Jet 2, the world's first jet powered cars. Jet 2 won at Le Mans. One invented the leaf spring suspension and the double roof on the Land Rover Defender. One of them invented the Massey Ferguson seed drill that I think is still in operation today. My granddad made motorbikes for Triumph. So there was this kind of inventive engineering thread that ran through it. And the women held it all together. My nan ran a sweet shop in the red light district of Coventry, a place called Hill Fields. So she was a really kind of like fiery businesswoman. And the politics were interesting. So she was a real
Yeah,
Tory, and my granddad was really Labour. So they'd have both posters in the window. And whenever the Tory candidate came around, my granddad would just say, "One of yours," and my nan would do the same. So I had this
that's
really interesting, lovely
it's really
childhood.
interesting. I kind of want to, I don't want to interrupt the flow, but I kind of want to go how the world has changed, right? That two people could be married and
Yeah.
on different sides of the political spectrum, whereas now it feels much more controversial and polarized. And
Yeah,
people
it
can't
almost
really,
feels like it would be a precursor to you'd want to meet someone of the same view of
yeah.
as yourself, I suppose. But yeah, it was really interesting. But my parents were only children, so I didn't have any immediate uncles or
Okay.
aunties. So the generation
Next
above
generation.
were my, they
Mhm.
were my idols. Really, it was a really interesting time.
Interesting. And you were clearly close with them because I know
Mhm.
you you're and I know that maybe it was just during lockdown, but you kind of gathered all your four children around you and
Yeah.
living near or with you, and you work with them and so on. Did that sense that did that come from, I don't know, something in your family, or no, not really?
So no, I think so. Actually, it's a good question, and I think there are two elements to this. I mean, there were just me and my brother. My brother lives in Devon now. We get on, but we're not like that close, which is there's a sense of regret there, I suspect. But watching this expanded family happen, and we used to have
Mm,
parties regularly, I remember just thinking, wow, how amazing to be in such a three-dimensional, multi-generational group, and we kind of created that ourselves.
mm,
So we had four kids back in the 90s. Last one was born in 2003. So yeah, they range from 30 down to 21. And by happenstance, they did all come home in December 2019. My daughter, her husband, and their baby came home in 2019 just to kind of move out of London. My middle daughter, she was traveling around America. She came home. My son came back from university, and we had a daughter still at school. So we found ourselves, that's a lot of people. That's like seven people and a granddaughter, isn't it? That's eight people living in one house, and then their partners moved in during
mm.
lockdown as well. Once we were allowed to have bigger, we got told off on walks a lot because we were a big group, and the rule of
Yeah,
six didn't apply to us because we lived together. We could go out as a 10,
yeah,
and that was fine. But oh, some of the
yeah.
fights on the canal side. Yeah, and I think we sought that. Nicola and I both sought that. I guess community in blood, and it was wonderful. And growing up, my dad ran his own business,
Yeah.
and so I had this role model of a different. There were two things that really shaped me, and they're both familial in many ways in terms of enterprise. And one was my dad running this photography, and two, and John Elkington knows this man or used to work with this man. I got a placement with a guy called John Roberts who ran a company called Test in Camden, and he ran the whole business as a family business. And it was a really interesting view into really close proximity entrepreneurship and doing good creative things and ways of working that would involve me turning up and opening the door, John would be in his dressing gown feeding his cat, and you that could be irritating, or that could
Yeah.
be, freeing. And I chose to see it as the latter.
That's the latter. That is super interesting because one of the things that strikes me is you share a lot of family life on social media. I mentioned briefly, and we can come back to the qigong, but I would be like, no, this is my family space, but that having, I guess, not a lot of distance between the two. Do you think are there downsides to that before you
Yeah,
pick it up?
yeah, for
Or can we
certain.
just be
And
the Instagram version of your life, really?
no, I mean, the thing is, I show the bad bits as well as the
Yeah, but
good
this is what
bits.
I get the sense.
If I'm sad, you'll know it. You'll know how I'm feeling by the music that I put on my Instagram circle thing. And today, I can't remember what it is today. I feel love. I think it's Donna Summer. It was Donna Summer yesterday. So I'm feeling up today. Sometimes if you get on there, it's Johnny Cash.
Then you're
And it's
down.
hurt. But don't ring me, right? Or please ring me
Yeah,
because I'm feeling
check
really
in.
low.
Oh, that's a
It's a good
top tip.
question, Louise. So the constant debate we have within work
Yeah,
is, do we need our own a work Instagram? And we have got one. It's called Ape Studios, and we never use it. And so occasionally I'll ask people what they think. Still, I have a separate, and everyone said, no, we like to be able to see 360 degrees.
yeah,
Um, but it does come with its own stresses for certain, and its own tensions. My wife in particular is not such a massive fan.
yeah,
But I think it's part of, ADHD, and which we've all got now, obviously. And this kind of like lack of barriers, this lack
yeah.
of segments in my life, which is both a
Yeah.
curse and a
And
gift.
no, no, I advocate hugely for people bringing themselves to work and not having two personalities and so on. And I think my team knows if I'm in a good or bad mood on a Monday morning, for sure. But it is just really interesting to do that and then have the spotlight on. I'm just realizing that you look like you are, advertising a certain type of corn and snack that
Yeah,
and
I've
I
borrowed an
look like
office.
I'm somewhere weird. Normally people see me with a bookcase. So just I am in the Lake District. It's Lake Windermere, sunset. I've been really lucky to be invited up to something called the Marewood Country Hotel to do 24 hours with Impact International. So that's why I'm here. But why are you looking like a sweet shop slash not a sweet shop, proper corn ad?
Proper corn, yeah, it's clients. So I'm with a client. So I had a meeting this morning. I ran a workshop this morning looking at circular fashion with the British Fashion Council, and I didn't have enough time to get home and get set up. So I've had to kill like 2 hours knocking about Soho, and then Proper Corn really kindly lent me some space. I'm not advertising them. Other forms of popcorn, other brands exist. But yeah, that's where I'm sat, just outside Euston Station, near Drummond Street, on Drummond Street with Proper Corn.
Great. Super. So let's jump into this book as a starting point because I feel like then I want to come back to your other books and some of your other work, if that's all right.
Mhm.
And as always, I've kind of got lots of post-its in it, and we could go in lots of directions. So again, this is where I'm looking for everybody else to tell me where to emphasize. If you've read the book, if you haven't, it's worth reading, even for people who feel like they know sustainability really well, because I think it lays out in quite a lot of detail what are the challenges environmentally, what are the impacts businesses have in so many different ways, and then quite a good guide how to approach those. Some of it I disagree with, but we'll get to that, I hope. And you start it with COP in Glasgow. And page one, and when I was re-looking at it recently, I was like, there's a quote that says something around responsible business. Is it selling the ship we make that nobody wants in a sustainable way? And that's actually where business had got to by COP26 in Glasgow.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of we have a client and we did a big piece of innovation work on their business model, and the CEO sort of dubbed it in secret what we're going to do when we need to stop selling stuff to people they don't need. That was because businesses are in that mode that they do need to rethink. But tell me, why did you why did Cop in Glasgow, in a sense, make you want to write this particular book?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, there are two reasons I wanted to write this book, at least two. But being stood at COP and being taken along as part of the business exhibition side of it, with not really any idea. I think I've been booked for a couple of talks on regenerative agriculture, and not really having any idea what it was going to be like.
Mm.
I was a bit alarmed at the kind of eco, I say tourism, or the, the green LinkedIn boasting of people stood in front of the globe with their photo, and they're doing a video, and it's like, hey, you know, I'm at COP because you got to give some back, right? And it felt like branding, not meaning, and I wanted to kind of dismantle that atomic bomb a little bit. And also, I'd written two other books which weren't on the core of what I did. And actually, people didn't know what I did anymore. They saw me as someone who taught people to speak and someone that did innovation, both of which is true. But I got a degree in environmental science 35 years ago. And it's literally all I've ever done to earn my money is green stuff. So I wanted to reclaim some of that ground. Now, there's a little bit of ego in that, and I'll be the first to admit that. And there's a huge amount of urgency in that. There wasn't the book that, as a business, that I wanted to read. I wanted to do the philosophical bit at the front, and then
Mm.
the go from zero to net zero to regenerative at the back. I wanted to give people a hand to hold because business has created probably most of the world's problems, but I think it's the only thing that can fix most of the world's problems. And I wanted to kind of almost reposition enterprise as good. We need to seriously rewrite the Companies Act, and we need to seriously challenge shareholder primacy. But I wanted to get this ethos across that actually this is not about marketing. This is about the way we do business and the way we make money and the way we make change. And I think COP kicked me up the arse and made me go, right, yeah, now is the time. Now's the
Yeah,
time.
because it was the first time business had come out in so much force, right? I was up
Yeah.
there and it felt like a business conference, really, with a bit of negotiations added on the side. Um, you, because I think you've succeeded in the book in bringing it into actually this is not greenwashing, this is not just targets, this is some really concrete things, quite technical things to do. So a couple of things on that. So do you think that people like us who work with business, who know that most people in business are good people, and I think you even say it in there, there's very rare you come across somebody who says, no, I'm out to do evil and wreck the world.
Mhm.
Um, but generally want to do good. But do you think we sometimes get a bit of Stockholm syndrome? That because we
Yeah.
work with them, we know that they're lovely and we know they mean well and they care about the future. And so we're a little bit too understanding and not quite urgent enough.
I agree with that entirely. I think there's a complacency that comes from knowing that they're doing something, but also knowing they're not doing enough.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. It's really easy to see how great some of the people in some of the world's worst businesses are, and think, oh well, they mean well. We're just stuck in a system. Yes, they are. So therefore, Shayler, challenge the system. And you're right. It breeds a complacency. And I was probably too soft when I wrote the book. I got some lovely feedback from Jonathan Porritt, who was very
Oh yeah,
positive
you've been
and
way too
lovely.
soft for him.
Well, yeah, he said, you let the bastards off the hook. And I absolutely adore that man. And so, yes, if I was to rewrite it again now, I think I'd be more combative. It was this fine line, Louise. I wanted to make sure that I didn't make people feel so uncomfortable that they didn't finish it or,
Mm.
or, or, or write it off as something that was business focused. But I also wanted to make people aware that there are some significant challenges and we got to get on it now. I was probably too lenient in reality.
Well, I think we all do it, right? Because how do you work with people if you've decided they're bad or evil? If you believe
Yeah.
that you can shift business and use the power of business for good. Um, so I've got a little question. Actually, this is for everybody who's not Mark for a second. Um, Maybe we just do a quick, how much would anybody like to go into in detail? Because there are two pieces. And when I was thinking about this session, Mark, I was like, how much do we want to go into the environmental challenges or business? impacts and the different ways that business has impact on the world, because those are two things that I think this audience might already be fairly well versed in.
Yeah.
So if you'd really like, and I'm going to ask if Jenny to count very quickly, to go into environmental challenges the world's facing, could you just do a thumbs up or a signal on your screen now? No, see, everybody knows. Oh, one, Hannah. Okay, see you. So we might just touch on it then. But and in terms of business impacts and where business impact, okay, a couple. Lucy, okay. Hey, Lucy, nice to see you. I didn't see you sneak in. Okay, so we'll touch on it, but we won't go super deep because I think we do know this audience knows quite a lot. So if you were going to say top environmental challenge, I know there's several you've got written out in the book. Where do you think we need to focus right now?
In the most urgent one, which is climate.
Okay.
And that's really hard because it's become so politicized, that it's become so divisive, particularly with Trump arriving. You can't talk about carbon or climate on any social media platform, whether that be LinkedIn or whether that be other stuff, without someone saying it's all a scam. It's such a divisive issue. Now you just got to follow the science. But climate's the most urgent. It's the single biggest existential threat to our humanity that
Mhm.
that we have. And I think we've got to seriously wake up. We've all set targets, or everyone set targets for 50% by 2030, and we're going to get some significant rowback on those
Oh yeah,
targets
it
over the
started,
next
right?
two
They
years.
can't, people are not able to um put it in. Thanks, Charles. The one of the things that I've started saying really is maybe it's about de-risking your business, looking at opportunity rather than go, oh, you should be decarbonizing.
Yeah,
Because
I
quite
agree with
frankly,
that.
if you're not decarbonizing, your business will be at risk, let alone the entire globe. But do you think that's the
Yeah,
way to do it?
yeah,
Also, on those
I really
platforms?
do. I think the whole language of carbon is hard for some people to listen to. I'll come on to carbon myopia in a minute because I've got
Yeah.
a real challenge to some of that stuff. Um, But I think we're seeing a shift towards talking about. I don't care if you believe in climate change, your insurance company does. I don't care if you don't believe in climate change, your solicitor does. And that's happening. And I think that's really good because this is about risk. This is about continuity and risk. And business does not work well under discontinuous and very risky situations, even though it thinks that's what creates opportunity, which arguably it does. And I think it's really important to frame the problem in the language of today, not forgetting that it's all about stability and climate and survival. And clearly there are massive links between carbon and then the next biggest risk, which is biodiversity breakdown and biodiversity collapse. And that's massively worrying, but it's predominantly driven by carbon and
Mm,
predominantly driven by temperature fluctuations and inconsistencies. So yes, you're right. Exactly what you said, Louise. We need to change the language, but keep the eye on the same target.
yeah. And and maybe we just go into that a little bit around language. And you are, I think, self-confessed provocative,
Mm.
and when you speak, you you give people a kick up the backside, both in how you express yourself, but also the angles you take on different things. Are you going to amend that? How do you feel people are going to react differently maybe to that now? Because it's really clear that what's happened, particularly in America, um, is affecting what, like you say, what businesses will say and listen to.
Yeah, you're right. And it's really worrying. Am I going to amend it? Nope, I can't. I am me. I can't hide who I am. And I'm the only person brave enough to stand up to one of the large fizzy drinks companies and say to the board and say, you can't keep putting sugar in plastic and sending it around the world. You can't do that. You won't be here in 20 years' time, in 10 years' time, right? I'm not going to change that. It's going to be, I'm going to have fewer platforms to say that in America over the next 4 years. I'm really not that bothered about that. And I'm going to have a harder time having those conversations. But they still have to be had. I can't be anybody other than I am, Louise. And so I will always be honest and speak the truth. And the difference is that what allows me to do this is that I can come in and do that as an external. If I was internal, then I would seriously have to change my language. So I used to
Yeah.
be head of sustainability for ASDA. I think we just called ourselves environmental managers then. I was the only person out of that business doing sustainability work. There's got to be 100 people now, different business now. And I wouldn't have been able to be as bullish
Mm.
internally as I can externally. Now, I'd get more work if I was less bullish, because what I would do is I'd come in, drop a small bomb, and then say, here's your improvement program. Whereas what I do is I come in, drop a big bomb, and they say, interesting, we'll get him back next year, not this year.
So we can keep shaking. So
Yeah.
I saw Laurie had put in a comment or a sort of not quite a question, but how any top tips on how to emotionally link or connect with business people that
Yeah,
you think everybody could do, even if they don't necessarily want to drop a big bomb. It could be internal people. Any top tips from that?
Yeah, I learned this. So I was really lucky. My first 6 years of employment, after my placement year, which was a year that changed my life in so many ways, were working for Bradford Council. So I was an internal environmental consultant working with small businesses. So I worked with the small businesses across Bradford on sustainability. Predominantly, we just call it environment then, and it was really about energy and pollution. We'd say got into two things. Now, sometimes you'd walk in, and the last thing, a textile baron or an engineering company wanted to talk to anybody about was sustainability, and you'd often be greeted with, "Do you know what? Not today, Mark. I know we're not paying for this. I know it's free, but we're not that interested." So I found a way of bridging cultural gaps. And that was to meet them where they were. And I had to be super observant. I remember going to an engineering company once and watching them pour trike, which is a degreasing agent, which is
Hmm.
also an ozone depleter, all across the car park because it evaporates really quickly. And they didn't have to then send it off for solvent recovery, just get rid of it. And I remember saying to them, what are you doing? You can't do that. Were you going to dob us in? And I'm thinking to myself,
Yeah. Yeah,
probably,
I am.
um, unless I can change it. So I sat in the office of this guy and I said, you really got to change things, you know. He said, what difference does it make? We're just one company. Think about China, all the things that you hear
Yeah, all
today.
that.
And then I saw behind him a picture of him holding a fish. He's clearly a fisherman. He's got his picture of grinning, holding a fish. And we were right by the River Aire in Shipley. And I said to him, I said, "Oh, do you fish?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "What's that, a pike or zander?" He says, "Pike, big pike." I said, "From the river here?" He says, "Yeah, there aren't so many anymore." I said, "No, it's just a challenge, isn't it, with water quality?" So where does your car park runoff go? When you pour that up, where does it go? Well, it evaporates. I said, "Yeah, but the residues won't. And what about the oil off the bottom of the cars? And what?" He says, "Oh, well, it drains into the river." I said, "Should we have a think about that?" Yeah. So I'd have to go where they
That's
were.
almost almost rather passive aggressive, Mark, which is not what I normally associate you with.
I'm not passive aggressive, but what I
I
am
know.
is gently pointing out the bleeding obvious. Look, the way that I've always worked is, and you can get ripped off here, is I like to make them think that what they have to do was their idea, even though it was my idea. And I have to be really careful. So manipulating people, that sounds really bad. Being able to change behavior is absolutely essential. And I don't care why people do it as long as they do it. So that'll be either financial or it'll be something like that where they've got a hobby that
Yeah.
depends on the natural world. Or it'll be, do you know what, your customers really care and you're going to be judged on this. Or your suppliers are putting pressure on you, or your workforce really
Yeah.
do give a
Yeah.
shit
Yeah.
about this.
I think it's one of those that you and I share, right? That we'd rather be effective and get them to move than have them think it's our idea or that we're right. We'd,
Yeah.
whatever it takes in a sense of what's the argument. One of the arguments made in the book, and I'm now going to sort of jump into something I disagree with it a bit, was there was a quote, and I'm going to find it. It says something about if sustainability is costing you money, you're doing it wrong. So
Yeah.
for me, that had that bell of the former US climate envoy John Kerry saying, oh, we can prevent climate disaster without changing the American way of life. And I remember when he said that, and I was like, oh, bloody hell, no. People do need to know that things are gonna change. And so um, when I when I saw it in your book, I was like, isn't that just the first wave of sustainability in every company can save money, but that's maybe the low-hanging fruit. But actually, we do have to, and you do that in the book, but sort of fundamentally change what we're doing, how we're doing it, but that it isn't all win-win-win. So I just want to challenge you a little bit on that because I can't.
It's a perfectly fair challenge, and one that I will make ground. I will give ground on.
Ah,
That there are
that's unusual.
absolute hot. No, I'm so. Uh, One of the key skills in my job and your job is listening and then replaying. And what you've said's right. If sustainability is costing you money, you're doing it wrong. Absolutely. In wave one, phase one. In phase two, you're going to need to make some capital investments, and there is going to potentially be a mechanical or an investment cost there. And then when we get to phase three, I go back to what I said the first time. If it's costing you money, you're doing it wrong. So how are you going to sell products that people don't want, the world doesn't need, and there's no place to put the waste for? Doing that is going to cost you money. If you're a fizzy drinks manufacturer, having no business because the world's health authorities, the world's health
Mm.
trends has moved against you and against the fact that the bottles are not what people want, that will cost you money. So
Yeah.
yes, shifting to become a health company, which is the journey I'm on there, shifting to being a health company is not cost free, but it's a lot cheaper than failing. So fundamentally, the mass balance is in my favour
Yeah.
of truth
So
in that
it's
statement.
yeah. So in a sense, time horizons is a key factor, I guess, because failing might not happen tomorrow or with the next quarterly results or whatever, but but failing will eventually cost more. Is there also um, is there also something around I guess that piece around opportunity cost and what do you think that the current fairly recent sort of backlash is going to do to that? Because we might say, oh, there was a trend towards health, but and there might still be, but actually the stronger trend. It could be sort of gearing towards self-determination, and nobody should be told what's healthy or not for them. So
Yeah,
that how long do you think that will last? We've got debates about this in the office. I'll declare, and I think what we're thinking. Well, it's not going to last full Trump presidency. It will come back, but I don't know. How do you have any views on that? How long that will take?
it won't last the full Trump presidency. You've got some really interesting conflicts there. So you've got you know, a health leader who doesn't truly believe in science. Um, you've got free speech advocates all the way through that organization, but it's not free speech. It's free speech plus some lies, right? And being able to divine or define the truth is going to be increasingly challenging. And it's that classic throw everything at it so it's super confusing strategy that Trump employs pretty much with everything. Fundamentally, I don't want to enter my 70s propped up in a chair pissing myself, right? It's not about how long I live, it's about how well I live. And we'll see, we're looking at a position, if we can stick with health for a little while, where by the end of 2030, I think 70% of NHS spend will be on, I think it's on metabolic health. Now that's on metabolic diseases. That is terrifying. So we can change that now
Mm.
if
Yeah,
we
if we want
focus.
to. Yeah.
And by the end of 2040, the vast majority of government spend will be on ameliorating the impacts of climate change and biodiversity loss. So the cost of correcting the trajectory now is significantly less.
Yeah.
But, and you're dead right on this, we need leaders who can see that. And maybe we've got that in the UK. Maybe we haven't. The jury's probably still out. We haven't got that in the USA, and um, I don't know how long it's going to take before it falls apart, but it will fall apart. Just think of the contradictions within that government.
Oh
Someone
yeah.
that doesn't believe in climate change, and someone who's accelerating the journey towards renewable energy, right? In Musk, and I'm not going to
Oh
ever
yeah. No,
speak
no.
positively of Musk. Does anybody want to buy a car?
I
I
was
mean,
going to
that's
say,
how I
have you
feel at the
sold your
moment.
Tesla yet?
No, what I've done is I've covered it in stickers that say anti-Elon Tesla Owners Club. And I bought it before he turned into a fool. And I've got two choices. I either ride it out or I sell it. And I don't know
Mm,
what to do. If the truth is
yeah.
told, I don't know what to do. There's nothing wrong with the car, and the charging network's amazing, but
Yeah.
can't align with a fascist, can you?
And, oh, no, but presumably you've given him your money, so
You've had it
so
already, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
so whether you keep it or not, doesn't matter too much. No, we've had some of that. I just saw a note from Joe that I will read out. I think there's a question in there. If business is part of the solution and climate is the biggest
Yeah.
challenge, how does anything change without first addressing the underlying incentives of
Oh,
business? Growth,
great question.
imperative, first mover advantage, multiple traps, etc. Do you want to have a go at that?
Yeah, it's a great question because we're nudging into degrowth, the concept of degrowth here, which is incredibly frightening for most capitalists, right? If capitalism is broken and we need a better version of it at the moment. And you're right, continual growth in a finite system does not work. It does not work at all. I say the biggest two challenges we have is how we make the same amount of money from selling less stuff or fewer atoms, and how we attract and retain the best talent in the world. Both of those come back to sustainability. So without derailing an economy, which we're going to probably derail itself anyway, we have to shift this emphasis from shareholder primacy
Yeah.
towards like value economics, or I don't know,
Yeah.
system value creation. There's loads of words that we can use here, but we have to challenge the idea that we can keep selling more stuff to people whose lives it isn't making better, um, and can't possibly maybe not afford it. And when a way has gone away, there's nowhere to put it. And closing the loop is one thing, and we can do that. We can create
Yeah.
circular economy solutions, but it's not slowing down consumption. It's just creating circular economy solutions. So we're going to need a bit of that. We're then going to need to kind of unzip this idea of I shop, therefore I am. When I've got shopping has become an antidepressant, and so being able to unzip that so that we're able to buy the things we need without hanging our self-worth on that purchase. That we don't describe who we are anymore. We don't have deep conversations about our views anymore. We buy a pair of trainers with a V on the bottom, and that's significant. That's enough, right? And it isn't enough. So we need to truly challenge why we buy. And I'm going to keep going because I think Louise is frozen. In my opinion, we often buy as a way of, almost like a leisure activity. And I think it's really important that we understand that and we change that. And you will not buy your way to happiness. You will be your way. You will love your way to happiness. So companies that can align with this, and I appreciate I'm saying this in a very early part of a Trump presidency where this is not it's going to land on deaf ears there. If we're able to do this really effectively, we can change the way that we value who we are, and we change the way that we explain who we are.
So I wanted to segue into consumers and stuff. I have this feeling that for the last 50 years, 60 years maybe, we have we as a sort of citizens have numbed ourselves with shopping, with sugar, with medication, prescribed and not, and lately with social media, so that we don't really have to feel how we're feeling, and therefore we can just keep shopping, and we get those dopamine hits wherever. And that's one of the reasons not enough people are acting now, because actually we don't feel it as strongly as we maybe should, as the indigenous would, who are deeply connected to nature and community and themselves. So how is there something there that we should be getting brands? And I know that when you work with companies, it's often brands, quite big brands, that and consumer facing brands. What could they do to redress that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And you're right. We've become kind of cocooned and insulated. You know, when you're wrapped up in a duvet, it never feels cold outside, right? And but we wear duvets as I mean, what they're called, these fleecy things people wear these days. God, that make me sound really old. Um,
It does, yeah.
really old. But if you insulate yourself from what's really happening, the world's always great, right? If you paint the sky, the ceiling blue and put a sunny lamp up there, it's always great. And it's only when you step outside of your Truman Show world that it becomes you see reality. And so we have anesthetized and we have desensitized ourselves with all of those things, you know, whether that be carbohydrates, whether that be drugs of whatever kind, or whether that be consumption in other ways, or whether, you know, there's all kinds of addictions out there. So yes, shocking ourselves out of that is going to be really, really hard. And business has been happy to go along with it because it means that they can continue to sell and the graph can continue to go like this. The graph needs to go like this. And you know, we know what's happening. You know, by the middle of this century, we're going to see population numbers level, if not full, but definitely level. So how do we make more money? How do we keep that economic boat afloat? Well, we're going to have to enter a period of level growth, degrowth in reality. And I go back to what I said, you know, back in the 80s, if you wanted to find yourself, you bought a copy of The Beach, you jumped on a plane and flew to Thailand, and you went and lay on the beach, paid someone to do a meditation retreat, got drunk every night in Koh Lipe, and then flew home a different person. It's not like that anymore. If you want to find yourself, you go inwards. You stay
Mm.
exactly where you are, and you take a TM course, and you go inwards. So we're already beginning to see a transition to working out who we are. Now, maybe that's just my midlife crisis age speaking. I don't really know. But we're already beginning to shift some of these things. And I think that we're going to see, obviously, a slight slowing of that change. But I think that change is unstoppable. You know, we can't become happier by consuming more. We have to face this fact that we become happier solely by the people we spend our time with, and the things that we do, and the people that we love and that love us. And that has to be the currency that we spend. Now, if a business isn't aligned with becoming a health business, isn't aligned with becoming more sustainable, or isn't aligned with allowing us to grow in that way, what business have they got? And we need to boycott them. You know, we do need to boycott them. Really challenging question, Louise, but I thank you for it.
Um, I want to just touch on brand. I want to keep a little bit on that brands and consumers because, you know, you are brilliant at telling great stories. Part of why you're a fantastic presenter, and you've helped lots of brands do that. And you and I have talked about it, and it's in the book around authentic stories. And I was thinking when I was reading that, you know, you highlight the story of Nike doing something quite extraordinary back in, when was it, 2018 maybe, supporting the US quarterback for the NFL, Colin Kaepernick, when he takes the knee to highlight racial injustice. And there was big uproar, lots of criticism. He should, you know, Nike should drop him, etc. And instead, they run that ad on believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything, which is really powerful, right? Believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything. And just I feel like we could all do with asking ourselves how much we're willing to sacrifice for what we believe.
Yeah.
But, but, you know, it feels really authentic for Nike as they're telling that story. You know, both you and I, who love brands, would approve. You know, they're going out to bat, and yet, and I know we've talked about it in the past, but is it just obfuscating the fact that brands, including Nike, are fueling consumption and adding to the environmental and social global inequality through their production, through their supply chain, and because they're doing cool ads that make us feel something, with the help of people like you and maybe me, but not so much. You know, yeah. Isn't that
Yes, of course. No,
popular?
you're absolutely right, and it's it's the elephant in this room. So I absolutely love the work that Nike do on brand, and it isn't Nike, it's Wieden Kennedy
Yeah.
on the whole. And yeah, I cannot wear their shoes. They're too narrow. They've compressed people's feet. They're too high. They're not good for me. Why do I love them? Because of the way they tell stories. Now, if they could tell stories about good things, if I say this all the time, if we could use all of the power of the creative industries to focus on social inclusion, to focus on a change in the way that communities work, and alongside that, sustainability, then we wouldn't be in this position. And Louise,
Mhm.
we've failed in our job over the
Yeah.
last 35 years to shift the needle. Even John's failed as a kind of like complete pioneer and massive hero in this field. Even
Mm.
John's failed because we haven't traveled fast enough, quickly enough. And you're absolutely right. I am falling into the trap of of the bells and whistles and the storytelling and deceit of a company that says stand for nothing, fall for anything, but you got to buy some more sneaks while you're there.
Yeah.
Now that's essentially what's happening. And hand up, I love the way they talk to me. I love that brand. I
Yeah.
don't use that brand. Why do I love that brand? What is it? Tell you what it is. It's familiarity, and it's the way they changed advertising. And the one big shift was, I think it was 1979. I was about 11 and I was in Coventry Godiva Athletics Club. And they produced a poster called The Battle of Atlanta. And I was talking about it this morning, actually. And it's a group of men who just ran the Atlanta Marathon, and it's pissing it down with rain.
Mhm.
Some have got shoes on, some haven't got shoes on. Only one of them is wearing a pair of Nikes. Doesn't matter. Some of them are laying down, some of them are stood up. They are drenched. And it's just that. It's the Battle of Atlanta. And it's not about the shoe, it's about how running makes you feel. Now, that's beautiful and
It looks brilliant.
pure, but buy my sneakers, right?
Yeah.
That's the bit that we struggle with. And you're absolutely right. And I need to have a good, long, hard look and word with myself, Louise, about my position on my love for the way they use words,
No.
because it's still fundamentally in pursuit of profit.
But I'm totally with you. I admire great ads and great storytelling all the time. There's a couple of questions that make me think, well, um, let's talk a little bit about, I guess, policy. Um, and and they come back to the US. There's Rita saying, Brooklyn in the house. Thank you for dialing in all the way from Brooklyn. We are holding up out hope in the States that global enterprises needing to comply with UK, Europe's regulations. Is that too optimistic?
Is it too optimistic? What have we got if we don't have optimism? What have we got if we don't have hope? Is it too optimistic? Possibly. I think I wouldn't want to be living in America right now. I wouldn't want that blanket wet feeling of hope being extinguished.
Mm.
But it's at the darkest times that we birth new leaders, that we create new movements, and that we build a better alternative. Because let's be honest, the reason he got in was because he listened. You might not agree with anything that he does or says, but he appeared to be listening. He was on receive, not on send. Now, obviously, Project 2025, there's a whole load of stuff behind him that is vile and horrible. But we deserve better leaders, and we deserve better politics. And it's broken both sides of the Atlantic, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, no, I would agree. On the point of hope, I I may have bored you with it, but I think there's a great quote around hopelessness, and that it is when we really have no more hope, when we realize that the situation isn't going to change, nobody's coming to save us, that really that is when we just have to roll up our sleeves and start working and just get
Yeah.
on with it. And that actually maybe the sort of hopelessness that a lot of us felt at the end of last year, it's just the prelude to saying, okay, then. So we're not going to be saved by a Democrat president in the US or by any of the other leaders. Apparently, again, jury might be out in the UK. We've seen Europe move to the right quite significantly. Then we just have to do what we can do. and not wait and hope.
Once you realize there is no prince or princess on a white charger, you got to do something
Do
yourself.
your
And I've
job.
had this in my career. I remember sitting in my camper van in about, I don't know, would have been about 2011.
Where's your
And
camper van? We've got to
it was
get
in
it.
it was in Margate. So we were staying in Margate. Obviously, we were way ahead of it being cool. Then we were staying in Margate in a campsite, actually a little bit further down the coast, past Weston on Sea, and into a place beginning with B. I can't remember what it's called. Anyway, beautiful, well worth a stay. And it had rained solidly all the time we were there. So the camper van was drenched, the awning was drenched. We had no money, and we drove into Margate to take an Airbnb, which we spent every penny we had on, and the kids went to the cinema, and I didn't have enough money to buy an extra ticket. So I sat in the camper van, and I just thought, well, it's all right, because if I get that job, or if I get that contract, everything will be fine. And I just thought, hang on a minute, there's no one coming. You put your flares out, you put the bat signal up. He or she hasn't arrived. Crack on. And as soon as you have that realization, like, you roll your sleeves up, you get stuck in. And I feel that's where we are politically. And I used to work with a company in Devon or Devon Somerset border, Blackdown Hills, and they were, I won't tell you what they are because you might be able to research them, but they were struggling, and they were losing confidence, and he was talking about getting someone, an angel in. And I said, you don't need this. The person who's going to solve this problem for you, the person that's going to save you, is already in this room, i.e., him.
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, do you want to invest?" I said, "No, I haven't even got a camper van anymore. No, I don't want to invest." And there was this, we often do it. There's someone coming to say, and when we know there isn't, that's when we have to do something. Like, no one's going to come from the Democratic Party and save America,
No.
right? That the Americans have got to save America. Turn your back on these crazy amounts of money going into politics and the control, and you look at the billionaires in politics, and it's obscene. It's not just America. Right? I,
Yeah,
I
no, no.
appreciate that. And America's full of the most amazing people I've ever met. Some of my dearest friends, some of the most incredible community movements all come out of that country. And I'm going to link back to a question from Duncan. Actually, I'm sorry. I hope you don't mind me
Right.
going to the questions.
No, no,
I
no.
wonder if Duncan is in relation to Liv Botting, who's a friend of mine. There's a whole bunch of people out there who are not able to afford the luxury of retail therapy, and their driver is survival. The likes of Trump and Farage paint a picture that these people relate to and believe they can solve their problems. This is bypassing businesses and talking to the individual. How do we change the masses' view of these false promises? I don't know, right? I'm going to be really honest, and I hope she's not watching. But my mother-in-law admitted recently, I mean, she's a rabid Tory, but she admitted recently that she voted for Brexit after lying about it for years. And I was
How did you
so
go?
angry.
Oh, yeah, I want to hear
I
how
was
that
I was
happened. Yeah.
livid, and I said, what did you even think you were doing, right? And I kind of never challenge her on the Tory stuff. It's up to her. I don't mind. And she said, "Well, we were misled." I said, "Were we?" She said, "We were misled." I said, "Well, the gullible and racist were. Which one are you?" And
Did you
and and
actually
the,
say this to her?
yeah, we didn't speak
Oh.
for a couple of weeks. Um, but the interesting thing was, she reads the Daily Mail, and she believes every
Mm.
little bit of it. We were misled. Said, by who?
Yeah.
She said, the media. And I said, "Well, so have you changed your media?" No,
Mm.
no, she hasn't. And look, I mean, I say this all the time, but the boomers are all about to die. There's going to be a massive transfer. I don't take any relish in saying that. It's going to be a massive transfer of
Oh,
wealth
well.
as it
Yeah.
kind of comes down. There's a real opportunity to do something different, and that's what I hope will happen. Our money is still our most powerful environmental tool, and we need to be really focused on what we spend it on. That's going to be I think the key in the short term to bring hope. And abject poverty is horrible, and there are people just shopping for survival, and there are people who can't shop. They have absolutely no money. We can't. Sustainability is a middle class concern for many. It can't be. Right? We've got to dismantle abject poverty and wealth inequality at the
Mhm.
same time. You can't pull
You
them
can't
apart.
separate the two, right? So
No.
we have to do both. And I wonder whether actually that comes from some of the other stuff you do, which is around community and grassroots. To come back to Duncan's question, there's two options. One is, and I think Rita made a comment about how do we tell another story than Trump did, and the Democrats weren't strong enough on that, and maybe because they didn't want to change the system either, just wanted to tinker with it, really. And but from a grassroots perspective, getting to know each other, connecting, I think that is a a counterbalance to the political pushes we see. And yeah, and I do think that the EU, even with the right turning of the Commission, are still going to hold to some of those climate commitments. They might water down the need for reporting, but they haven't shifted their general opinion, and none of them, even the most rabid right wingers, aren't talking a lot about climate denial in the way that Trump and the Americans can get away with.
No, for absolute certainty. And, Europe's a different place. It still faces its own right-wing populist challenges, and no two ways about that. But you reminded me as you were talking there, there's an amazing American artist called Chris Jordan who did a lot to kind of like, I guess, bring to our attention the plight of seabirds ingesting plastic by mistake. He took some great photographs of dead birds. I mean, that's a ridiculous thing to say, but he did this brilliant piece of work, and it was grown out of interviews he was doing with grassroots community and sustainability movements in California. And
Mhm.
every one of them that he interviewed, they were like, well, we would be fine, but there's only us. We're on our own doing this work. We need more of us doing this work. So we thought, okay, well, and that was including the Sierra Club, organizations like that. So he then went out across America and he interviewed more and more and more. And everyone that he interviewed, he wrote their name down. And there's this amazing picture of him, I think, holding his daughter's hand or a small child's hand against the backdrop of all of these names, which is a 7-story high circle of names. And we think we're the only ones fighting the good
Yeah,
fight. We just need to put our hand out. It's like I always describe it as like, blue tack on a student hall's wall. You take your posters down, you've got lots of little bits of blue tack. But if you get another bit of blue tack and you touch it and you touch it and you touch it, before you know, you've got a massive ball of blue tack. And we just need to join together in a different way. And we've now got like systems and social cohesion that we can do digitally, which will allow us to do that. We just got to turn our light on so we can be
yeah,
seen. So, back to the original point, I am incredibly, after a period of 2 months of dark depression about the state of the world, I'm incredibly hopeful because it can't get any worse.
yeah,
Right? We've got to start fighting for what we believe in now.
yeah. Um, and maybe Evgenia will find a link, and we'll send it out when we send out the link to this conversation. We'll send out the link to Chris Jordan's work as well, just in case
Yeah.
anybody. Um, And it kind of, we haven't quite answered them, but there are two questions. One from Julia, which is, what do you think is the next frontier of innovation to make true change happen? And then one from Laurie, which says, I think we can make changes, but don't we need broader social, business, political agreement as to what our goal is? Making changes without that being clearer is change just for change with little improvement. And are our leaders up to helping us clarify those goals?
That's a great. I'll answer that question first. So I've been working on a report today for a client where the feedback from the rest. I was interviewing parts of the team about the sustainable stuff they're doing, and this was the single biggest thing that came back. What are we aiming at? Yes, we've got our 50% by 2030, but what does that actually mean to me? And how can I do that and still grow my business? And galvanizing a clear trajectory, super important. And I don't think we have. There's no roadmap, right? There's no way of knowing how we get from here to regenerative, from here to zero impact. There's no roadmap. So that that observation is absolutely right from Laurie. We need this clear view of what good looks like. And, you know, I say it all the time, but creativity is the most powerful environmental tool there is. Every one of us is creative because all it is imagining a world that hasn't arrived yet. And then you wouldn't imagine a worse one. You'd always imagine a better one. You know, less traffic, less injury, less environmental damage, more joy, more street parties, as long as they didn't go on past curfew. You know, you would automatically, you know,
Yeah.
we'd all align on something good. And you know, for many people, that sounds like the 15-minute city, but for others, 15-minute city is, of course, us being controlled. Alignment depends on an agendaless space. To quote my friend Steve Cole, who's on here, alignment depends on an agendaless space, and we don't have agendaless spaces.
Yeah.
And I don't know how we create them, but we cannot go on being polemically led, being this two ways of looking at the world. And I don't think we're going to get as bad as the States, but I don't think we're going to be far off. So it's going to get
Mhm.
worse, 5 years, and then it's going to get better. And anyone interested in buying Greenland and moving in with me, we should do that. No, but you know, I'm
You
up for.
can't have Greenland.
I
As a
know, I'm really
Dane,
joking.
I object. Greenland
I
is
am.
not for sale.
I'm building on a theme, but I'd be well up for, you know, demonstrating how small alternative communities can work fairer and better.
Mm.
And that will necessitate sharing, changing the way we feel about ownership. A big piece of work I was doing today on fashion. It's really interesting around the cleanliness of kind of vintage clothes. First of all, call them secondhand. No one wants them. Change the word to vintage. Everyone wants those. That's really a really cool thing. And some of these hygiene factors and how we create a sharing economy and a non-ownership economy is really challenging from a
Mm.
social norms perspective. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
I love that's a great question. So Laurie and Duncan win my best two questions so far. But the first one you started, where's
Oh,
that first
Julia,
one?
so no, don't worry, I've got it. It's what do you think
Okay.
is the next frontier of innovation to make true change happen?
Okay, it's a brilliant question this is. So without wanting to be blasé about it, we've done an incredible job on energy. And there's more to do for absolute
And
certainty.
I, I,
But
I
what
yeah, I'm going to just laugh because I happen to know that Julia, the wonderful Julia who asked that question, used to work for Centrica, so knows a lot about
oh
that. So that's good.
so
Right.
she knows I'm not going to mansplain anything other than to say when I started my career, the carbon impact of a kilowatt of energy was about 795, 850 grams of carbon per kilowatt. When I looked last week, it was 73 grams of carbon per kilowatt. It was a particularly good, sunny, windy day. So it really helps. So grid decarbonisation is a really positive story. Without even beginning to talk to Tim Smith about his 5 kilometre water
Yeah.
extraction, amazing. So we've broken real boundaries there, and I think that's fast. That's absolutely fascinating. The next frontier in innovation is going to be how we feed ourselves.
Mm.
It's going to be how we can, without wanting to gravitate immediately to the word regenerative. We've got to be able to scale these things. So how we can feed a population. You know, we are calorie rich and we're nutrient poor. We can eat more than we want, but we're not getting what we want out of the food. So we have to change that model. We have to change the model of who owns those resources. And there's an amazing project in Detroit. A friend of mine, Davita Davison, set it up, and it looked at. I mean, she always called Detroit like the poster child for urban decay, and she
Mm.
wanted to solve two things: poverty and health.
Mhm.
And so the interesting thing about a city like Detroit, which is built around motor cars and
Mhm.
obviously music, is that the gardens are really big, the yards are really big. So she did this kind of gardening, growing your own project, and the
Mhm.
results were astonishing. I'm not going to quote them because I'll get them wrong, but a significant drop in people with type 2 diabetes, a massive drop in obesity, moving away from mass produced hyper processed food towards homegrown food, people trading what they grew. It's really worth digging out what she's done. That's a wonderful case study. She's called Davita Davison. She went on to work in Sydney, I think, and do something really similar there
Really?
with the indigenous population. Yeah, there's some
That's quite
fascinating
interesting,
work going on.
moving from Detroit to Sydney, right? Also,
Yeah, very much
apart
so.
from, yeah. And again, it's that thing, two things. One is that change is coming from the edges and from the grassroots. And whilst we both work in with big business often, or business, to help use their power for this shift, the innovations do come and the change will come from that local piece very, very often, rather than
Yeah.
from soft drinks company or fizzy drinks company completely shifting everything. Or me and my joke with Unilever that they need to break up into to several businesses and stop shipping
Yes.
around the world, etc.
I agree with that. And one of my favourite moments with Mr. John Elkington, and it was a wonderful moment where I saw this fiery, poetic, powerful man take it to. We were doing some work with Procter and Gamble. I can't remember where we were, and it was a nice workshop, and we were saying nice things, all the things that you said about Stockholm syndrome, and then all of a sudden, John just handed it to them on a plate when it came to phosphates, and it was one of the most powerful talks I've ever seen anyone give, unplanned, impromptu, and he didn't get kicked out of the room, and they listened and probably did bugger all about it. But I think it's really important that we carry on using our authority, our seniority sometimes to address these things really clearly, because they are aligned between sustainability and poverty. There is
Mm.
no gap. One
Yeah.
feeds the other.
We have to fix inequality. And yes, it is a joy to watch John when he unleashes like that. We still see it quite a lot. Um, the there's one bit I don't want to drop, which is creativity, because we've talked about branding and so on, but when we talk about innovation, and when we talk about creativity, I feel like they go hand in hand. And I spend a lot of time on them, as you know. We create these imaginariums and so on, but this idea that if you can get imagination and courage into business people, then they can come up with new innovative solutions. But do you have a theory of why business really still isn't tapping into creativity for the core business, for business models, for the strategy and so on? Because that still seems to be very much run in business as usual ways. You have innovation, great, the creative pieces, whether that's product design or something. But really, at the core, why are we not seeing more creativity? And with your brilliant definition, creativity is simply imagining a world that hasn't arrived yet. I love that.
It's a really great question. I'm going to talk about it generally, and then I'm going to talk about specific. I don't want the
Please.
whole thing to be about America, but it's important that I make the point that I'm going to make.
No.
Look, businesses are risk averse fundamentally, right? They're focused on their shareholder return, on their pension fund ability. They're focused on balancing their debt versus their working capital tied up. They're risk averse. They shouldn't be, but they are, right? So rather than invent something new, rather than gravitate towards a gut health, metabolically positive, healthy drink, they would just like crank the handle on what they already do, and they'll learn loads more than taking this brave
Yeah.
step here. Right now, they'll get more brand kudos over here, but that's harder to,
Yeah.
to manage. So
No.
they're not unleashing creativity because they're scared, and they're scared of losing ground against a competitor, or losing investment from the market, this invisible thing that props up with confidence, or in confidence, failing businesses until it's too late, until they're blockbuster, right? And Blockbuster is a really good example. But not sorry, Toys R Us even better. Toys R Us is a really good example where you've got a place where you could go and buy stuff that made people happy, and you could then set up a lending library. You could gravitate towards a much more circular business, and they made some massive mistakes. Firstly, they forgot about community. If it's a
Mm.
place to go and play and to make a slime workshop, or to do something, and then maybe you'll buy something, but maybe you won't. You just love them a little bit more. They forgot that their bricks and mortar is a place to connect rather than a place just to transact. Number one. Number two, when they did transact, they didn't know how to do it online. So they contacted Mr. Bezos and said, "Will you fulfill all of our sales for us?"
Mhm.
And Mr. Bezos went, "Yeah, of course we can." And so everyone went to Amazon to buy toys. But Amazon sells toys from everyone, not just from
Yeah, for
Toys
Toys
R
R Us.
Us. So it's too late for them, and we can't. I can't have any grief over that. But business fails to innovate because it thinks the threat is further away than it is, and it thinks it's ultimately optimistic. Things will turn over. Things will pick up. Yeah, we've got a 2% decrease in sales this year, but
Yeah.
we'll turn it around
Yeah.
next year, and they
But
won't.
isn't
They
isn't
fundamentally
that
won't.
because we're still looking backwards to try and predict the future rather than accept that things have changed?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So when I talk about innovation, I say there are some real pitfalls here. One is innovating by competitor. What are they doing? Let's do the same thing. That's not the worst. The worst is innovating by history. What did we do last year? Let's do that again. And there's a great German word, Einstellung, and it can be interpreted in many ways. But my favorite interpretation is letting the successes of the past determine what we do tomorrow. And we're going to see declining returns from that kind of thing. You know, Police Academy, arguably a very funny film. Police
Yeah.
Academy 9, not a funny film. Like we can't be innovating
Yeah.
on
On
sequel.
the same.
Can't, right? The world changes and the problems happens when it changes and we don't. And America, to go back to America, America is completely screwed here because their healthcare is associated with their jobs. So you take no risks, you don't become a
Yeah.
tall poppy, you do what you did before a little bit better. Otherwise, you get sacked and then your kids will die. I mean, that's an extreme example, but that is the fear.
Yeah. No, no. Thank you. I think that's really it's important. So it's that piece around how do we make it better to fail. And I know we talked about it. And again, sort of a famous hypocrite talking about fail fast, etc. We're not going to talk more about him. I want to switch through because we've talked a lot about macro and what can we do and what can business do and policy and consumers and so on. But I think one of the interesting things about you, um, and it doesn't necessarily come across in this book, how you know, um, is is how you have a really interesting balance of what I call macro systems, business change, market change, versus the micro, the everyday life, the local community, the family, and so on. And I know lots of people, some who are on this call, who have that debate all the time. Do I invest my life in the big things? Systems change that, and quite frankly, the system doesn't feel like it's getting any better. Here we are having, you quoted it. You've worked what 30 odd years. John has worked 50 odd years. I've worked probably at least, yeah, probably also close to 30, not quite, in this space. And when we look at it, we go, oh God, we failed. And you could get up every day and feel you failed. So how do you balance that with, actually, I'm going to focus on growing my own vegetables and swapping them in with my neighbor? How do you, and how do you balance that? Because I think that there's some really interesting things that you do on that, and maybe it's the time to talk about the gang. Uh,
Yeah.
and
It's a great question, this is. And actually, you asking me this question, Louise, has made me realize that I've drifted away from some of those things. So when I was talking about my time living in Bradford, working for Bradford Council, I lived in a beautiful place called Saltaire, which is a stunning little model village and an international heritage centre now. It's incredible. And the community was the community I've lived in that looked most like me. I don't mean in terms of colour or gender, it was beautifully diverse, but in terms of philosophy. And in that period, I helped set up. It's not me; it's a group of people. The Bradford Local Exchange Trading Scheme, so the Brad Pound, essentially. I think we called it the Brad. Can't remember. I set up the local permaculture group. We set up a really nice little tool hire, a car sharing club, and even the simple thing of a babysitting circle that allowed you to regain some sanity one night every 2 weeks. Those really small micro projects allowed me to feel more buoyant about life. This was pre-97, so we're at the end of the Tory government. We couldn't quite see what was coming yet. It didn't feel like things were going to get better. But so there was this kind of real community action that I threw myself into because it's all I could control. My job was fine. I was doing green stuff and that felt good, but I could control this. And we set up a environmental festival. We did some guerrilla planting, things that then went on to become incredible edible. And the cardboard to caviar project, I was involved in the very first kind of machinations of that. And I've stopped doing that, Louise. I've stopped doing
I,
those things.
I'm going to say, I'm going to now disagree with you. That was not at all I think you do a lot of it. I think that well, at least that's what I've seen. And it maybe not be the same things, but you're using your online platform to exactly create that community. And
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that is
so,
true.
you know, how many people are part of the Chigang group? I should have, should have been part of my research. But on Instagram,
That's,
where you
yeah.
started saying, oh,
So,
okay,
so
8 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to do some Qigong and please follow if you want,
yeah.
but I'm not a teacher. I'm just a bloke in my garden.
And it's interesting. I did that for fundamentally selfish reasons, right? As someone that changed into Blue Sky, good idea. I've done that one.
Yes.
As someone who used to speak in public all the time, and then there was no way of bringing people together. I needed an audience. I do my best dreaming when I'm awake, and I do my best thinking when I'm presenting to other people. The amount of notes I've got on my phone where I've had an idea in mid presentation. So I needed an audience. I did it for me, but audience needed hope. And
Mm,
all it was me regurgitating what I heard Ram Dass say, or talking about a community project that I'd see over here, or telling stories about cardboard to caviar. It was like a positive Radio 4. I like to call it a pound shop
oh,
Radio 4,
brilliant.
but it was a positive Radio 4. So yes, that built community and it built capacity, and it got to the point where there were 120 people every day live. I did it for a year and a half every single day. And there's 1,000 people, or no, yeah, 1,000 people in the group. And each one, even today, was I might only have 25 people on in the morning.
Mm.
Next one's Thursday,
Well,
actually, which I think is
tomorrow,
tomorrow.
right? I was thinking
Um,
I was going to do it tomorrow because I've got time.
do it, and I'll be rambling on about you, Louise.
Oh,
That's exactly what I'll be doing tomorrow. Um, I might only get 25 people on, but occasionally, and there is vanity here, right? I'll look at how many people watched a particular one, and it'll be 200 or 300. So
mm.
people are still, no, I'm not naive, Louise. No one's doing the Qigong. They're chatting to each other in the chat, and they're listening to me wax lyrical about what I think about whatever it was, right? It's
As an audience, I think most of us are doing a bit of the Qigong, if not all of it.
that's good to hear.
I
That's
think
really,
that,
really
but
good
to me,
to hear.
that is, I think that, and the reason I wanted to bring it up, not because you're not doing it, because you're exactly doing that. And then maybe just talk about, yeah, how you balance that and maybe talk a little bit about reasons to be cheerful, because I think that's one of the most stunning projects, especially because it came from you as a family. I
Yeah.
love.
Okay. So I'll do both of those things. So how do I balance? That's really difficult. I get asked the question a lot from my wife because I do the qigong, that I run a meditation group online as well, about once every two or
Yeah.
three weeks. And my wife always, Nicola, she always asks me the same question: why don't you just meditate? Why do you need an audience? She knows me
She
really
knows
well,
you well.
and she does. And I don't need an audience to meditate. But if I don't put it in the diary and turn up for somebody else, I won't do it.
Mm.
I'm ADHD as heck, and I'll go and find something else to do. And that might be ride my bike, it might be scroll on my phone, it might be do nothing. I don't know. But I'll find something else to do. So if I put it in the diary and I do it for somebody else, it gets done. And it's the same with Qigong. And it does create tension. There's no two ways about that giving, what was ostensibly, it's not anymore, it's about half an hour, but what was ostensibly an hour a morning for the best part of 18 months. And then it went down to 4 a week for
I
the best
remember,
part of
yeah,
3 years.
and that's 2 normally, right?
Just
Yeah.
two, yeah, and
Okay.
and that does create tension, but I do it for my own sanity. That's what I do that for. And it's the same with the meditation. I could meditate, but if I'm telling other people how to, it's really weird. We sit on Zoom for 20 minutes to say nothing.
Mm.
But it feels like I'm with someone, and I really like that proximity. What was the other half of the question? There's another part of the.
So
Oh,
I
sorry,
just want
Louise.
you to briefly outline reasons to be cheerful.
Oh yeah, that's it. So reasons to be cheerful started. So I was a founding partner of the Do Lectures. I'm no longer actively involved in the Do Lectures, which was not my decision. And but the good thing about that is it created a space for me to say, okay, so I'm no longer part of that. What could we do with that time that I put into it? Because I wasn't getting any money or growing anything out of that. I mean, I put money in, never got any money out. So it was really simple. Here's the space. How can I fill it? And having my daughters and my son at home, they're a different generation. They know people not like me. So we were able to find voices that needed amplifying and to apply or show them to my audience. Simple as that, finding unheard voices with important words and share them. And that started off with little talks, and then we've made the Christmas annual. I got that image in my head of waking up on
Yeah.
Christmas Day and picking up the Whizzer and chips and the Beano and thinking, oh yeah, we should do that. And we lost so much money, but it didn't matter because we made so much change. That's the main thing. And then we did online discos. Did you ever come to one of the Friday night indie discos?
Yeah.
Yeah, they were fun. I've never DJ'd well, and I didn't DJ well for those, but it was good fun. And then we did these communion half dayers, and then we did a 1 day, and now we run a 2 day event every year, and we are part of the Blue Earth Summit event now. We ran 2 days last year at Blue Earth Summit, and this year we're running 3 days
I'm
at Blue
gonna,
Earth Summit.
so I'm aware of time because we've got about 3 minutes left. It has gone really quickly.
Sorry, I didn't
Just what
realize.
you missed there, and I just want to, am I right in that the story behind Reasons to be Cheerful was that one of your children's friend committed suicide, a young person?
Yeah,
And
so
and that was
yeah,
where that whole impetus came from. Because I think that's important, right? That
yeah,
you can see that and you can say, oh, that's sad and be sad, or you can see that and go, well, how do we do something with that? And I think that's
yeah.
original.
So it's mass times velocity squared equals impact, right? And there was a need to find voices, and that's the mass. The velocity squared, the urgency came from my daughter Mabel's friend taking his own life just before lockdown, and realizing we all realized how difficult that generation were finding everything. And we can point at social media, we can point at lockdown. There's lots of things we can point at, and we wanted to do something that raised money for his mum's charity. And it ultimately, we gave half to her, and no, we gave it all to her initially, and then half to Calm, campaigning against living miserably, and half to her. And if it's for me, it's really upsetting, obviously. But if one good thing can come out, if one phone call could be answered from someone in need, if you can change the trajectory of someone's life just a little bit by funding that,
Mm.
you've only got to be 1 degree off when you're hitting a snooker ball on a big table for it to have missed the pocket. And we didn't want any more people to miss the pocket. And so the velocity squared, the urgency came from, yeah, my daughter's friendship group being ripped apart by what happened.
Thank you. I just thought that was beautiful and a wonderful equation. We haven't finished. I haven't talked to you about music or other things. We haven't answered Lucy's great, always great question about making the future visible without making people fearful. Um, but actually, unless you have a very short answer to that, we're going to have to call it, I think.
Okay, I'll wrap these up really quickly. Music matters. It doesn't matter which music you like. It is the lifeblood. I think in song lyrics and I think in hooks. ABBA wrote 8 hooks into every single song. And that's what we need to do with sustainability. We need to give it some Velcro and some hooks and some teasel. How do we make the future visible without frightening people? I don't think it's possible. I think we need a little bit of fear, bit of a stick, but the carrot needs to be bigger. We spent far too long telling people act now, change now, because if we don't, we're goosed. And what we need to do is act now, change now, because look how great the future could be. And we need to shift that mixer, the DJ mixer, towards explaining how great the world could be, rather than how bad it will be if we don't do something. But we do need a little bit of fear because it's your velocity squared.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining.
And thank you, Louise and John. You don't need to do this, right? You could stop this tomorrow and you'd still earn good money and people would love you. But this is a really lovely way of giving back to people who can feel part of a bigger community. And it's like the cement between the brick. A building's beautiful, but a part of bricks on its own not going to hold together. What you do, Louise, and what you've always done, John, and what everyone on here does is form the cement that holds everything together. That's the strongest thing.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you very much.